When we set this theme of Against the Odds, this person was the first speaker that we approached of all 145 speakers, because the work that she's been doing and writing and putting out there was absolutely on the theme. So I'm going to leave the introduction there for Solitaire Townsend from Futerra to tell you about that work and Against the Odds. And after she presents her bit, we're going to invite Molly, founder of Young Wilders, back to the stage to have a bit of a conversation between them, but most importantly, between all of us. So enjoy your next session. Please do join us if you're here in London for a complimentary drink afterwards. It'd be great to speak to you. To you, Solitaire.
Okay, so I was at the COP conference in Brazil up until last week, and I caught something really weird. So my voice might sound a little bit unusual. I'm also running a slight temperature, I've just realized. So that means if you've ever wanted to ask a wild question at a conference and get a potentially wild answer, this is your chance. I'm in an entirely altered state. More so in an entirely altered state because I just came back from COP, which I've been going to COPs for a really long time. And I don't go to COP for the ceiling. That's not where you find the most exciting breakthrough work happening. I go to COP for the floor. What is the absolute minimum that the countries of the world who are signatories to COP can agree to, including countries who despise each other and countries who are at war with each other? What can they agree to, considering the absolutely diametrically opposed interests that they have, especially those from the oil states who are completely diametrically opposed to most action on climate change? And if you see COP as the floor rather than the ceiling, it's actually pretty impressive. It's pretty damn impressive it happens at all and that they turn up. It's pretty impressive that more heads of state attend COP than attend anything else. More heads of state attend climate COPs than attend the G7, than attend Davos. There's more leaders there talking about climate change than anything else on planet Earth. It's actually pretty impressive that we managed to get the Paris Agreement at all. It's pretty impressive that we continue to discuss it every year. It's completely fucking inadequate, of course, but that's a flaw. And we need a floor. We need to know what is the minimum. We need to have giant conversations and actually really intense arguments about whether we're going to mention the word fossil fuels or not, because you might not know this, but fossil fuels are not mentioned in the Paris Agreement by words anywhere. They don't actually turn up in the Paris Agreement. We only got the words fossil fuels into COP announcements in the last 2 years. And this year we were arguing about whether we were going to be able to actually set a roadmap for transitioning away from fossil fuels. But for those of us who've worked in climate in 30 years, it's just like, I'm sorry, we're discussing that. It's like, I didn't realize that was still a point of discussion. But actually, again, considering that every country that is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, including countries that entire economy are based on fossil fuels, and every country has a veto on what comes out of COP, it's actually pretty impressive we got those announcements anyway. But I want to tell you a few stories about where we are at the moment and why the idea of against the odds is quite idea. I need to explain this cap. Apologies to anyone who doesn't like swearing. I'm really sick and I'm probably going to swear a lot. Sorry to those of you online. Maybe you could bleep me if I swear too much. And I want to talk about why I'm so optimistic about what's going to happen next, even though we're facing down some of the greatest challenges that I believe humanity's ever faced. So I'm going to see if I can flick through this. Look, aren't we fabulous? This is Futerra. Oh, look at all the wonderful people we work with. Okay, but let's get to the interesting stuff. So for almost 30 years, I've been running Futerra with an amazing leadership team. Futerra is a communications and a change agency. I also am the founder trustee of a charity called the Solutions Union, and I advise big companies and I advise Hollywood studios, and I advise ITV and Sky on how to get sustainability and nature on screen, and I write speeches for people, and I get to go to things like COP. I also have to mind what I say quite a lot of the times with quite a lot of audiences, because my job is not speaking my truth, my job is convincing other people, which often means biting my fucking tongue. Because if your job is communication and storytelling, if your job is to engage people who are different than you, then actually quite a lot of my job is working out what people need to hear rather than what I want to say. And I'm going to take us through that a little bit, because when it comes to communications and public engagement, there's almost this idea that if we're just more authentic, if we just tell our story more compellingly, if we just talk about what matters to us more, eventually it's going to cut through. And it really hasn't. And that strategy really isn't working for us, even though we double down on it and double down on it. But first of all, let's just decide where we are at the moment. We've still got a choice. In fact, for most of our lifetimes, we'll still have a choice. We've got a choice. On one side, we've got a solutions economy. On one side, we've got an extractive and exploitative economy. Not an extractive and exploitative economy by accident. It was designed that way by a bunch of very uptight Victorian white men. So our extractive and exploitative economy absolutely is based on the necessity of there being producers and consumers, on that poverty is literally built in to the system, because you can't have everybody at the higher ends of consumption. You need to have those who are in the producer class. We are going to go past 1.5 degrees of global warming. We might be able to claw that back, but we'll go past. We will not hit all of the Sustainable Development Goals. More people by head count live in slavery today than at height of the transatlantic slave trade. It's an extractive and exploitative economy. And we see that around the world, particularly right now in terms of against the tide. We see that in the fact we're going to have the first trillionaire. I still don't even get my head around a billionaire. Someone explained it to me this way, which is if we go back a million minutes, we're back in like 2003 or something. If we go back 1 billion minutes, we're back in the Roman Empire. I don't even know what going back 1 trillion minutes would mean. Is that like prehistory? Like, is that the dinosaurs? It's like just trying to get my head around income inequality as it is right now, trying to get my head around the extractive and exploitative economy as it is right now. At the same time, we have a solutions economy. I use the economy deliberately because that's the word that people use outside this room. We use society and community. That's not the terminology which is in the dominant paradigm at the moment, and I use the language of the dominant paradigm. So the solutions economy, where more people are employed by cooperatives across India than in all forms of capitalistic employment, where renewable energy is now the cheapest and fastest growing energy on the face of the planet, where again and again and again, every time we ask people around the world what their priorities are, climate change, nature, and action comes up top again and again and again. We have this nascent way of being, of living, of connecting with each other, of supporting each other, that is there as an alternative. But this one is not going to give up easily. And how are we doing? Well, as I said, I did my master's. I did a master's degree in sustainable development, which sounds extraordinary because I actually didn't know what sustainable development meant when I first started it. I did a master's in sustainability in the mid-90s, the 1990s. That's before some of you were born. We actually recently had the first employee start at Futerra, who's the same age as the company, and HR's told me I'm not allowed to point that out to her anymore. So I started back here. You're going to imagine me. I'm quite a lot thinner. The hair is quite a lot longer. I swear a lot less. And the way that we planned all action on nature, action on climate, action on social justice, was we were going to do more every year. It was going to be this incremental taking action. This is how all the plans are written down. This is everything which we do, which is we're going to take action over time, incrementally up to these big target moments where everything will change. And then, of course, the problem with that is that if you get behind by even a year, You've then got to double it the next year. And if you get behind a little bit every year, suddenly the gap between where you need to be and where you are becomes unsurmountable, which is absolutely fine because humanity has never changed like this. We have never gone through incremental change to major social, technological, or economic transformations. We go through what the sociologists call punctuated equilibrium. This is not me, this is the sociologists who sat me down and taught me this. Punctuated equilibrium is that everything stays the same. Everything, all the systems and the power and the money and the structures and the infrastructure, how hierarchies work, how things get traded, who has power and who doesn't have power, it all stays the same. There's so many sunk costs and ways in which those power structures protect themselves, that the equilibrium is self-sustaining, a little bit like a natural system. And those systems self-sustain long past when they were actually serving the needs of people. Those systems self-sustain when they actually become self-cannibalistic. Those systems still sustain when they're actually hurting everybody, including those at the top. Those systems stay until the pressure and the change and the necessity for change builds up, and then bang, everything changes at once, and then we go back to equilibrium. The reason for that is that most people hate change. We don't like change. Being in a state of change is evolutionarily bad. You actually want to build all your change up at once and then go back to a nice, steady state where you can plan and you can see forward and you can imagine what your children's lives are going to be like. And we know this is true because we've literally lived through one. I'm 51, I'm at basically the same age as the internet. I'm the last generation who went to university with libraries. Like, I actually tried to get my head around the fact that if the book wasn't in the library, I couldn't write my essay. And it's like, that can't be the way we organised it. That sounds really inefficient. It's like, I'm the last generation who would go on dates by agreeing to meet somebody somewhere, and if they weren't there, you left. You didn't text or decide or phone or what have you. Like, literally, we've been through this punctuated equilibrium and we're in a new equilibrium, which makes even those of us who were there in the previous equilibrium go, really? No, that sounds like the 1800s. It was the 1900s, but that's a whole other conversation. And so this is how change happens. So this is how change will happen if we manage to make a transformation towards a low carbon, nature positive world. The change will happen in a very short period of time, and then we're back to a new equilibrium, which will feel like the norm. And if this is going to happen, I feel like we're about here. We're just in the foothills. And this all sounds great until you realize that actually it's not guaranteed to go up. Could go down as well. And there's lots of forces, and they were out in force at COP. COP sent this note, the COP organisers sent this note saying, okay, it's like 80% humidity and like 42 degrees, you guys don't need to wear suits. Like, you'll all die. Like, you're a bunch of Europeans. Like, wear some cool clothes. And so we all turned up wearing quite cool clothes. And still were like really, really hot. Apart from the fact that ever so often you'd spot someone who was still completely suited and booted and be like, oh, fossil fuel person. They don't seem to actually, oh, maybe they're not human. So going to get in trouble for saying that, but anyway. So it is possible to go down as well as up. And when I get asked, well, basically, what can send us up there? What actually is going to push us up there? We're going to have a conversation about that. So all these transformations, all these going up that hill have been very strongly argued against. Behind. It's easier to find quotes about the technology changes because they're quite funny. My favourite one is this one at the bottom. Rail travel at high speed is not possible because the passengers, unable to breathe, would die of asphyxia. Ladies, apparently our wombs would also fall out at high speeds. Rather than, rail travel at high speed is not possible because British Rail can't get its act together, which is another thing. But there's always been those naysayers who think that these transformations are not possible. But when, for example, you look at energy costs, some people will have read recently that Bill Gates doesn't seem to be that worried about climate change anymore. I've known him for a long time. I've actually interviewed him for my books. I wasn't surprised when I heard that because he's been saying for a long time the transition towards renewable energy is now built in. Like all this anxiety you have about the oil companies and what have you, it's done. Like you'll have 2 or 3 rogue states who will stay on a fossil fuel economy, but the vast majority of the world are going electrified and renewable purely because of the economics. Like even if we didn't have climate change happening, this transformation would be happening anyway at the speed that it's happening, irrespective of the environmental impacts, because it's cheaper. And so I find, although I disagree with the position that he's taking now, I know why he's taking it. This transformation is unbelievable. China last year brought on the equivalent amount of renewable energy as the entirety of the EU's consumption. That's how fast they're making these transitions. We've got all they're building coal power stations as well. They're not building them for the long term. These are basically pop-ups, which they intend to dismantle, not because they've got an environmental problem with coal, but just because renewables is cheaper. And they're only building coal until they can get the renewables in there, not least because they can also own them, because they actually have renewable resources. They have sun and they have wind, rather than everything else which they have to import. So again, we have this transition underway, but there are waves, and we are facing a bit of a backwards wave at the moment. So I wanted to share this. This is, what if I've got one of those little doobies? Oh, I don't have a little doobie. Oh, I do have a little doobie. Look, look, look. Isn't that exciting? Woohoo! Okay, now I'm going to do this without falling off the stage. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so I'm going to go with this is worldwide, but it's not as clear. So I'm going to go with the US, not least because it starts early. So this is 2000 up until now. And you can see these waves of media interest that go, and you can see them reflected slightly more sharply here, but this doesn't have, it starts in 2004 rather than 2000. I was there for these waves. I remember them. I remember this wave. I remember in about 2001 where we had a lot that was going on. We had a lot of announcements happening, lots of media coverage and interest. We had this wave which kind of kept going up. This basically is the financial crash. And, you know, when suddenly, oh, there's no money for sustainability, there's no money for nature, we can't afford all this green crap. Do you know how many times the phrase, we can't afford this green crap, has come back around again in my career? Like, at least nobody's making fun out of recycled toilet paper anymore, which they were when I started doing my career. And then this has been the most recent one that we've faced, which has been absolutely brilliant, the 2020, 2022 real peak, and then it's been falling. And actually, you'd find that falling even further in 2025. So we are in a downward wave, but can you notice something else about that? Which is each downward wave ends up higher than the previous downward wave, that this is doing this. And when I show this to business leaders and to politicians, it gives them pause because they go, oh, it's going to do that again, isn't it? I'm like, yes, of course it is. It is because the media works in waves. The media gets all excited about Fridays for Future and Greta and Black Lives Matter and Me Too and Land Back. And this is the huge, all Gen Z cares about is sustainability and the rules of work are changing. We're all working from home and clap for the NHS and we're all lovely. And then he gets bored. Well, quite simply, that narrative no longer captures the attention. And so they swing back this way, which is going, no, we need to bring masculine energy back into the workplace and nobody wants any of this crap anymore. And it's all about right wing and economics first, and money, and drill. And, you know, we all hate each other. And then they will get bored again and it will swing back towards this. And there's almost nothing you can do about it. That's basically how human communication works, is that we need to constantly reinvent, particularly in global communications. So obviously, we need to be worried about the swing away from some of the topics and that going against the tide that we're facing right now. It's a very, very difficult moment, but don't consider these to be deep, structural, societal level changes. It's just media. And the thing about tides is they go out and they come back in. And so actually there will be another swing up. My anticipation is it will be around 2029. I think we've got 28, 29. We've got a couple more years of the swing this way. If you track media trends, it will then take a while. It will start happening on social media. The alphas will come along and suddenly there'll be the new green generation. And then we'll see another peak. And then we'll see another drop. around 2030, 2035. So these swings will happen. We'll see this in terms of one of the swings which we're coming at the moment is we're in a very older voices dominant political narrative at the moment. Most of the most dominant political voices which get coverage internationally, Donald Trump being an example, are in the older generations, Gen X and Boomers, whereas actually if you look at what the millennials and Gen Zs care about, it's a very, very, very significant difference. And so, as Nietzsche put it, social change does happen one funeral at a time. Some of this swing will happen naturally. Again, I'm really unwell. No shit you should say on the stage. This gives me great hope because we ask people, I think, we go out with clipboards and go, do you care about climate change? People go, of course I care about climate change. And then forget immediately that they said they care about climate change. But this is what people search for on Google. Google's one of my clients and they share this data with me. This is some of the upswings in Google searches. And you'll see these aren't upswings in Google searches about climate change or nature or biodiversity loss. These are upswings in Google searches for things that actually matter to individuals, things about their life, their livelihood, their income, their home. This is a big learning for us in terms of what people are actually interested in. This has much more validity than any survey will ever have because it's not what people say they care about, it's what people have got time to actually put into Google. This is one that should be very worrying for any business. This is a survey, but it's one that I actually have some time for, which is asking, businesses are causing the biggest challenges facing us. Can you see back in 2021, as we came out of the pandemic, how people thought that actually businesses were almost 50-50 part of the solution? And now in 2024, businesses are overwhelmingly the problem rather than the solution. This is one of the reasons why the swing back will happen, is because that's only sustainable for a certain period of time. When people don't like business that much, it starts to become a real pain point for business, and they suddenly realize they actually need to suck it back up and do all of this ESG shit again because everybody hates them. I think we've got everything which we need, and I've only got about 4 more minutes. I think we've got everything which we need. I think we know what politics we should have. We know what economics we need. We have the technologies we already need. We actually know a lot of the systemic places. There are very, very clever people who have been working on this for a very, very long time. What we don't have is the stories that will bring it to life. This is when Harriet Beecher Stowe met Abraham Lincoln, because lots of people never believe me on story. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. I'm not sure if you've read it recently. It's a bit of a difficult read to a modern reader. It's a story of its time, fictionalized, written by a white woman, talking about the horrors of slavery under the American slave trade. When Abraham Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he said, so you're the little woman who started this great war. Sounds like a weird thing for like the leader of one of the parts who were fighting against slavery to say to a novelist. Until you realise that Uncle Tom's Cabin outsold Austen. All of Jane Austen's books, Uncle Tom's Cabin outsold. Uncle Tom's Cabin outsold Dickens. Or Dickens, Voltaire. Uncle Tom's Cabin outsold every book in the 1900s apart from the Bible. This book was a global phenomenon. It was so well known. It's referenced in other pop. If you've ever watched The King and I, it's referenced in The King and I. It's referenced in so many other books of the time. Everybody read this book, even though they lived in the era where you could listen to the first-person narratives of people who had actually escaped slavery. And the reason for that is when we talk about story, we mix up story as we would use it, the stories that we tell each other every day. All of us storytellers, we tell each other, we gossip, we communicate, versus story which is actually curated emotion. When rather than telling your story, you are curating somebody else's emotional state. What Harriet Beecher Stowe did is, rather than the extraordinary, difficult, true first-person narratives of people telling their story, she curated an emotional journey for other people to go through, so by the end of it, they felt like it was their story. That's what story is. Story is when you work out what emotion Do you want your audience to take away from this piece of communication or engagement, rather than what do you want to say? And after working with so many of the biggest NGOs in the UK and worldwide, with Sierra Club, with Earth Justice, with WWF, with governments, with businesses, never do I get sent a brief saying, this is the emotional state we want this communication to lead it with. What I get is, this is the information we want to tell people, or this is what we want people to know. Going, people don't want to know anything. None of us want to know. When people go, we really need to educate the public, it's like going, the public really don't want to be educated. I don't want to fucking be educated. I've got master's degrees coming on my ears. What do you mean you're going to educate me? That's so patronising. I want to be entertained. I want to have an emotional journey. And so when we're thinking about stories, we need to remember that we're 22 times more likely to remember a story than we are to remember information. Give you an example. So lots and lots and lots of information that I could give you about meat and meat consumption, about what meat consumption does to your personal health in terms of non-communicable diseases like obesity, like heart disease, about what meat consumption does for rainforest land, about the impacts of methane. You know, a bit of meat is fine, but overall we've got really big challenges, particularly with rainforest land in terms of meat production. I told my dad this for years. I work in sustainability, but he's a working man. Worked in farms for years as younger, then became a builder's mate. Meat to veg every night his whole life. Eventually I wrote an entire frigging book about it, which he read, and then he said, Sol is the only person that call me Sol, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop eating meat in the evenings. I'm still going to have it sometimes, but I'm going to stop having it in the meetings. I'm like, thank you, Dad, finally, you read the stuff on methane. 2 months later, he picks up the phone. Sol, love, if you'd have told me that I was going to get a better night's sleep if I didn't eat a giant hunk of steak every night, I'd have given up years ago. That's a story. It's probably the only thing you'll remember that I said today. But those stories are what people remember. And in fact, they believe. Now, this is harder for people who work in sustainability, who are evidence-based, who go out and find the data, who find the science. We're science-led in the work that we do. But people believe stories over facts. That's one of the reasons why we're losing. Because we are trying to fight stories with facts, because we believe in facts, and we believe that people should believe in facts. And so even if we know it's a fact that people believe stories over facts, we're still going to tell them facts because they're good for them. And we want people to eat their vegetables. We want people to be better people. This is something that the wider world's beginning to recognise. This is the IPCC in AR6, Working Group 3, in Chapter 5 of the IPCC report, where they actually started to acknowledge the fact that stories matter. There's 3 problems with our story at the moment: sacrifice, agency, and fatalism. Sacrifice is that we're telling people that they have to give up everything that matters to them. In fact, I've stood on stages like this where people have said, the number one message we've got to get through to the public is, this is going to take sacrifice. And I'm like, what, are you working for the fucking oil companies? Like, are you literally working for the other side? This desire that somehow, if it's not hurting, it's not working. If people aren't making sacrifices, then it's not real. It's almost as if our problem wasn't with the destruction of nature and the issues with climate change. Our problems was actually with the Kardashians. Like, that's what really pisses us off. It's not the impacts that we're having on nature or being the 6th mass extinction. It's the fact that people like stuff. Like, actually, sometimes what comes across is not that we care about nature, is that we hate what people love. And that sacrifice message, that fact that you've got to give something up for nature, and we kind of want people to give something up for nature because then it really matters, comes across in a lot of our communication, both explicitly and implicitly. And of course, it's a fucking lie. Because when you ask people what they really care about, and then you tell them, by the way, living a sustainable life in a much more sustainable system means that you will get a better night's sleep every night, that you will have more time with your family, that you will be less stressed and anxious all the time, that you will not feel like a failure, that you will be thinner, that you will have better quality hair and skin, that you will have more fun, that you will have more sex, that you will have a better life. That's true when you actually look at the impacts of sustainability upon community cohesion, upon air pollution, on what happens to people if they get out into nature more, if they eat more sustainably. All this stuff is true. But we don't sell them that. We sell them all the sacrifices they might need to make to get that. Secondly, big problem with agency is we tell people they can't make any difference. We poo-poo individual behaviour change. Bah, individual behaviour change doesn't matter. Forgetting that, of course, particularly for women around the world who don't feel safe in the public environment, who can't stand up on stage and make speeches, for women around the world for whom the idea of going out on a march when you're looking after your elderly parents and you've got 2 young kids is literally laughable. The fact that actually performative activism is a privilege that only a certain number of people can take, and that behaviour change, particularly household behaviour change, when women make 80% of the household purchases, is a really valid and impactful action, and dismissing it is actually kind of sexist. And finally, fatalism, that's what this is. 50% of young people, 50% of under 30s, agree with the status, we are doomed. This is more scary than climate change. Climate change is just chemistry. We actually know what we're going to do about that. Human beings are much more complicated than climate change. Human consciousness, we don't even know what that is yet, let alone about how to affect it. And that's why when we see all these surveys saying that people really care about climate change, but it feels like they or care about nature or love nature, and it feels like they hold those views really softly, that caring isn't well held. It's actually because a lot of them care about climate change, but they no longer think anything can be done about it. They care about nature, but they no longer think it's possible to protect it. So many young people have actually given up on our ability to take action. It's one of the reasons why you're not seeing many protests anymore, because protest, rage, is innately optimistic. Rage and activism says that you believe something can be changed and you're trying to change it, whereas actually you can just give up, go down the pub, scroll YouTube. That's what we're seeing. So that's what the Fuck Doom campaign is on. I've gone on about hope and optimism a lot over the years. Hope, optimism feels a little bit too soft at the moment. So I just upgrade hope and optimism to Fuck Doom. And the whole message is around the fact that you don't want to be an extra in the apocalypse. You don't want to be an NPC, for those of you in the room who knows what that means. You want to be a main character. That climate change and sustainability is a story, and it's a story that's stuck in Act 1. And we've got to move it on, because this is not a season finale. So I'm actually going to stop there. There's more slides that I could show, but you can bring them down, because I want to get a conversation with you. But the main thing I would say is that in this moment, what matters more is not that we inform the public, not that we give the public lots more information and insight and data, not that we tell stories about the problem, but that we become massive advocates for the solution. That we become storytellers of the solution, that we work out what the emotional journey is that we want our audiences to go on, and we take them on that emotional journey, even if they don't learn anything, but if they come out of that, at the end of that emotional journey, actually believing that change is possible and that it's good for them. So that's the main thing that I'm working on now, is trying to convince people that change is possible and that it's good for them. And that can be challenging for an environmental audience, because actually some of us are like going, well, maybe they're right that they're so fatalistic, in which case, why the fuck are you here? Give up, go have fun. If the world is doomed, why would you keep fighting? Deep down, we actually all know that action is worth it. Or we say, and it's good for them. It's like, well, it might not be. They might have to give some stuff up. And go, why would you say that to anybody? It's not the way to get people on side. It's also not true in terms of the things which people actually care about. The things which we know that people value will be better and more abundant when we take action on sustainability, and that's been proven again and again and again. So that would be my main ask of you when you come out of this, is think about what's the emotion that you want people to take away. This sense of agency and this sense of desire. I can do something and I want what I'm going to get for doing it. So I can stand up on this stage, despite the fact that you're all now a little bit blurry. And I really want to hear your questions in the last 5 minutes. Thank you so very much. I'm going to pull my chair slightly over this way. You guys can just go back to a backdrop. So I really don't want to breathe on you at all because I'm feeling terrible.
Shall I move it even further away? Hi, everyone.
I know we don't have very long for questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I've literally just here, my name is Molly, to kickstart the conversation. Actually quite hard to follow this, and actually my organisation does entirely in optimism and agency. So I've been trying to think of questions, I guess very quick fire one is just like some tips for if you say in 2029, that's when it's all going to start going up again. We're still 2025, and that feels like quite a long time to remain kind of ruthlessly optimistic and positive. So just some practical tips, like what's a TED Talk, an encapsulated TED Talk we can take with us all the time to remind ourselves when things are getting quite tough in the news?
So one, burning out doesn't stop the planet burning. Like self-flagellation, sitting there and going, what's the most important thing I could be doing right now? And then martyring yourself to do it, you're just going to burn out. Sit down and make a list of the things which you do that bring you joy. Sit down and make a list that if aliens turned up tomorrow and solved all our problems, what are the things you would still do? If actually nature was completely protected and regrowing and we actually had wonderful, abundant nature coming back, if people treated each other with compassion and care, if the climate was under control, what part of your job would you still do because you just fucking love it? That you just actually genuinely enjoy it, that you personally, selfishly get a kick out of it. That's probably the thing that you're best at. It's probably the thing that is your gift, because the things which we actually really love tend to be the things which we're actually best at. They also tend to be the things we dismiss because they come to us easily, compared to the things which we've worked really hard to do, which we tend to value. So what I would say is make a list of the things which you actually genuinely love doing and do more of those over the next few years. Because we actually can survive a couple of years of this swinging the other way. What we can't survive is losing the change makers, the solutionists, as I call it, because that positive change, that change up there, that only stops if you do. That's actually the only defining characteristic of whether we go down or we go up, that exponential punch, is if the people of goodwill continue to work on it or don't. And so you do whatever the frig you need. Oh, I started to think frig rather than fuck. There you go. You start doing whatever the fuck you need to get through the next couple of years, financially, emotionally, because when this slide starts back up again, we don't have time to recruit and build a movement again. We need to be right there with the people of goodwill who are able to grab that moment and run with it and not suddenly try to find a whole load more people. So I say be kind to yourself, do the things which you most enjoy doing, don't feel guilty about doing that. You've still got a couple of years to get through before the tide naturally will change to the other way.
We're all going to be ruthlessly like baking bread and knitting.
I love making speeches. I'm basically saying yes to speeches at the moment because I love engaging with our community. It's what I'm a weirdo. It's one of the things which I enjoy doing is being up here on stage. And I didn't used to do that much of it because it's like kind of going, no, I need to be in boardrooms and I need to be writing stuff like that. It's like going, no, I'm going to do the thing that brings me joy because I will come away from this probably much iller than I was about 2 hours ago. But it fills my heart to be in a room like this. So do the things that fill your heart.
Thank you. So we have less than 5 minutes, but it would be great to get some questions from the audience. Yeah.
I think you are amazingly dressed, or I really am tripping now. I love it.
Sorry, Savita. Yeah.
Hello. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. Obviously, you're saying that there is an uptick on its way, but there's always going to be narratives that we have to counter. How do we counter the fact that the other side have storytelling too, and they're telling very simplistic and very, very emotionally engaging stories effectively.
Oh yeah, mainly because they're much less uptight than we are about doing it. So there will always be counter narratives. The argument is whether you need to counter them or not. One of the biggest mistakes I ever saw was when at a big conference, it was a minister, the very first question was, how do we counter the narrative that net zero costs more? And then the whole conference, the next kind of hour, was all about countering that narrative. And I'm sitting there as someone whose job it is to do comms going, no, now you're doing the other side's narrative. Actually, you don't counter the narratives because most of the time they're not true, or the whole point of them is to get you to counter them and play their game rather than play your game. What you do is you shout your narrative from the rooftops. It's literally what they teach you in media training, is to block and bridge. If someone goes, how do we counter the narrative about net zero costs you more? You go, interesting question. The thing I love most about net zero is how much money it's going to save us. What I love most about net zero is how every single household over the next 10 or 15 years will be much more stable because we'll be countering costs of Russian gas, because we will be energy independent, because we will actually not be subject to giant energy companies setting us. And then you go to a story, which is my sister recently moved into a home, it's rented, doesn't make very much money, she doesn't own her own home. She moved into a home that has solar panels on it. My other sister lives just down the road in rented accommodation that doesn't have solar panels on it. Guess who's paying so much less for their energy and is feeling much less anxious going into the winter about keeping the lights on? It's the sister who has the solar panels. And to tell those kind of stories. So what I would say is, trying to work out how to counter other people's narratives is going and playing their game. The best way is to work on your narratives and to shout them from the rooftops, because the moment you start countering somebody else's narrative, you've already lost. You need to be telling your narrative and saying it and telling those stories of people who are experiencing your narrative. So whenever I did work recently with a bunch of doctors who globally, particularly the global south and the global majority, who really care about climate change and fossil fuels, and they had all these talking points about climate change and fossil fuels. And I was going, you're a bunch of doctors, I don't care what you think about climate change. I want to know no information about climate change from you at all. I want you to tell me stories of your patients and how climate change is affecting them. And you can change the names, but what they did is they spent an hour and a half sharing stories of kids who had asthma and the asthma treatment wasn't working because they lived by big roads, of people who had very, very, very serious mental health issues and none of the medications were working, but they managed to get them out into nature and it actually started having a real big impact. They shared all these stories with each other, and I'm going, tell those stories. That's what I want to hear from doctors. And all of you, what's the story you have? If you've got to work out 4 or 5 stories of real people's lives, where taking action on sustainability, where taking action on nature benefited that individual. And if you don't have those stories, if you can't think of 4 or 5 stories where taking action, either as an individual or in the community, or something just like moving into a house that has solar panels on it, actually impacted the individual positively, go and find them, because that's what we need to be shouting from the rooftops.
If people are all right with us going over by like 3 minutes, but then otherwise the whole point is we're going over for networks and drinks, so keep the conversations going. But if you could ask a very quick question.
Right,
colourful.
here's my question. You said about getting people to actually listen to it. In Stratford-on-Avon, we've got a repair cafe, and it's a wonderful idea. People would not even bother with that. You put your signs out, repair cafe, they do it. But also, I'm a keen amateur astronomer. I set up my local group, and we used to do the dark skies. It was a big passion. Patrick Moore was on the dark skies.
Very quick, sorry.
Yeah.
Suddenly now, with all these comments and everybody's interested in astronomy. And now we can actually say the dark skies, cutting out on the light. And that's how you've got to do it, isn't it? We've got to work it. And that's it, just
Absolutely.
simple.
So number one, I love Stratford-on-Avon. I have a master's degree in sustainability. I also have a master's degree in Shakespeare because I was a really boring young woman. And this is what I spent my time doing. And there's a repair shop that I was advising, wasn't in Stratford-on-Avon, was in London, and they were really struggling to get people through the door. So I said, set up a table outside, do repairs outside so that people can actually see what you're doing. Particularly if they're basic stuff, maybe not electronic repairs, transformed everything because people could actually see, I have one of those. Oh, and they're repairing it. It was like live, cheap advertising for them. And things like dark skies, things which people care about, dark skies is a great example of turning lights off. We need to turn the lights off for climate change. No, we need to turn the lights off because the moths get lost. People care a damn sight more about moths than they do about lights. Also, one of the issues with climate change is it's a global issue. Significant proportions of people in this country don't really believe the rest of the world exists. It's like, it's outside of their reality. Their reality is the people that they know, the communities they live in. And that's how it's always been. And so actually talking about the fact that moths in your local area are getting confused and lost and dying, and our moth populations are native British moth populations are going down, or children don't know what the pole star is anymore because they can't see it because of light. This is much more convincing than people. But the problem is that some of you will be rolling your eyes because that feels really parochial and local and not the stuff that people should care about. And it's a perfect example of the fact that we are never going to convince everybody to be us. The whole world are never going to suddenly wake up and go, oh, I should inform myself about climate change because big global issues and nature really matters. People are who they are. And that diversity of values and that diversity of worldviews is in itself a beautiful thing. And if we don't have respect and even love for the fact that people see the world in a different way than the fact that we do, we will forever be stuck in the bubble of people like us. Which is weird because as a community, we tend to value things like diversity and the fact that people are different. And we give a lot of vocalization to those topics. And yet, if someone has different values to us, we don't respect them or acknowledge the fact that that might matter. So quite a lot of being a great communicator and storyteller on climate change is swallowing back down your own sense of self and putting yourself in service of what other people care about and acknowledging and respecting and honouring and sometimes even loving and celebrating the fact that people care about things which are different to you, but the things which matter to you can also matter to them if you swallow it down. It's ever so hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but it will make you a much more effective communicator if you can learn to do it. It's also one of the reasons why I enjoy being in rooms like this, because I don't have to do that so much, because you do all care about the same stuff that I do. But when I'm in rooms full of CEOs, I wear smart suits and high heels and I don't wear fuck doom hats, because although that would be amusing for them and they'd find it interesting and an anecdote about this weird woman, it wouldn't actually convince them. I go in with charts and evidence and impacts and stories of how companies and crucially how CEOs and individuals have at the top of companies have done really well and got promotions and made fuckloads of money out of sustainability. If I go into rooms full of local people, I ask them about the local area, I ask about whether there's still as many trees here as there used to be, stuff that they care about. And I put myself in service of what matters to them rather than what matters to me. And if we could get a bit better at that, I think that we would be serving ourselves at the same time.
Amazing. I don't want to stop you, but I have to, sadly. I've got two jobs basically sitting up here. One is to, if you can join me in a big round of applause for Solitaire for an incredible corporation.
I was too tired to carry fuck doom hats, but I do have a whole load of fuck doom stickers down here at the front. I've touched this one, so I'm going to take it with me.
And just last but not least, just everyone, Savita mentioned at the beginning, but if everyone could come out and join everyone for a drink and we can continue the conversation, and hopefully you'll be able to join us at Maybe not.
But I'll put my mask on for
Save
10 minutes and
distance.
see how
Yeah,
we do.
We can take risks. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for an amazing day, and let's have a drink.
And can we massive round of applause again, because she's awesome.